Good afternoon, everyone. If you haven't met me yet, my name is Tracy Krieger, and my field has been in about 10 years in construction, but overall 16 years as a certified safety professional. If you know me, I'm so excited about and have a passion about this topic. And I'm excited to announce, too, that this fall, I'm going to be an author for the first time, and my book is called Sovereign Seat, and it really just helps us focus on leadership, and it is a faith book, leadership book, and I believe that we are called to serve others and to value every person. So let's get going with the webinar today, The Cost of Cognitive Overload. I've had the opportunity to help other companies improve their traditional safety program, but also add in psychosocial safety. And one of the questions that stay with me throughout my career is, why do we still experience injuries? We've had multiple injuries when we have programs, Cal OSHA, training, and we do great at all of that. So we want to talk about today is cognitive overload and what looks like when we have demands on job sites that is competing with our brain with limited attention. We now have so many things going on, even with our cell phones, that we're on our cell phones daily. We just have a lot going on for us. And so at what point are we overloaded with our brain? So today I'd like to challenge everyone to think about, when we're doing the incident reports, we spend a lot of time investigating on what someone did. We go, and I know when I'm doing an investigation, we're taking pictures, we're looking for witnesses and getting everything down. But today I'd like to spend some time thinking about what happened before that decision was ever made and that incident occurred. We're going to look at research and what it tells us about cognitive overload. And we're not going to be turning anyone into a neuroscientist, but we want to understand how the brain works and how it works with our employees. Like I said, we've investigated decades of safety regulations, training, hazard control, and in 2024 alone, OSHA reported 39 trench excavation fatalities. Oh, that gets me every time I say that, because we're doing a great job, all of you. We're doing a great job, but our next opportunity isn't just about another rule. I think it is about understanding how people really perform under real-world pressure. And like me, we've all been there. So we're going to bring it back to the website, and we're going to talk about practical ways that we can recognize early signs of cognitive overload and using safety systems and leadership practices. So I hope you have one takeaway that you can start practicing at work. So we have a quick exercise. I'd like you guys to participate. Just take 10 seconds. Look quickly at this job site, but what is your first hazard that you recognize? Yeah, there's so many hazards on a job site. And of course, this does not represent our job sites. They look a little better. And what is interesting is that we're all looking at that same image, that same picture, but yet we're seeing different things. None of us saw everything. And now let's change that situation. Now that we see that image, now it's at the end of the day. We are exhausted. We have heat illness. We are having the radio go nonstop, our phone. We got emails. We have people asking questions. Maybe the GC is on us for being too slow. Production is behind, and we just want to finish quickly and go home. And I've had some of that where it seems like on all the holidays, I'm at the ER or urgent care with one of my employees because they're trying to rush to get home. They're long shifts. The radio doesn't stop and the job site has to keep going. So looking at that same job site, do you think you would notice more hazards or fewer towards the end of the day? I think we'd probably notice a little fewer because we didn't stop caring at the end of the day or forget training or what we learned. And safety's still first. We believe it. But what it comes down to is our attention span is limited. As more demands come in throughout the day, our brain has less capacity to see really what's happening around us. It's kind of like we just kind of are walking in a little bit of a fog. You know how we kind of get home and we're like, oh, my car, how did I get home? So that's kind of cognitive overload. And it can change what we notice, how we make decisions, and how we communicate. So let's explore some more ideas on how, as safety leaders, we can recognize those early signs. Also, we're going to talk about the cost of safety. When we think about dollars, we think about worker compensation claims because our injuries then most likely turn into a worker comp claim with lost productivity, delays, overtime. Sky's the limit on that. And they can be costly. Those are important things to measure. But over the years, I've become convinced that there's another cost that's much harder to measure. And I think you guys have heard it. We've been talking about it a lot, especially if you've been in my webinars, is silence. The information we never received in the first place. The worker noticed something, but wasn't sure if he should mention it. Or maybe that question never got asked because they didn't think that it would be a question that they would get made fun of. So one thing learning in investigation incidents is those missed conversations can matter just as much as when we do an actual investigation. That's why cognitive overload matters. It just doesn't affect productivity. It can affect what people notice, what they remember, and whether important information gets started when it matters the most. If you haven't heard this story from me too, I haven't told it much, but it's so important. An employee came to my office and said, hurry, come quick. This employee was on the forklift and driving crazy, and everybody was afraid he was going to injure someone or himself. So I rushed out there to talk to him and got him off the forklift. And I said, hey, what's the matter? He said, my mom just died yesterday. I'm the only child. And my dad doesn't speak English and needs help with the funeral arrangements. So there's more to the story, but what I want you guys to know for today is he wasn't careless. He wasn't untrained. He cared about safety, but his brain could not carry anything else that day. That's cognitive overload. Sometimes the most significant hazards on the job site isn't the ones we can see with the forklift that's 10 tons. It weighs a lot. It's the mental load of a worker that may carry that no one knows. And no one knew his story until somebody asked. That raises an important question. What was happening to the brain that affected his attention, his decisions, and his activity, his ability to communicate? To answer that, we need to understand some of these terms that are often used interchangeably, but mostly they're different. Let's go over each one, and I'm sure you've all heard of each one. So let's review them real quickly. So these ideas are the foundation for everything else we'll discuss today. Think of them working together. So psychosocial hazards are the demands or pressure people experience at work. Psychological safety influences whether someone feels comfortable asking a question or reporting a concern. Psychosocial safety climate reflects the leadership commitment to identify and manage those pressures that affect our employees. They're all connected, but they're not the same. If we only focus on one pressure, we may never understand why someone may choose to stay silent. If we're focusing on speaking up, we might miss someone creating a pressure in the first place. So all three matter. So together, that helps us understand not only what happens, but why it happens. And that's where our greatest opportunity can improve safety. So think about your average workday. How many times does your attention get pulled away from what you're doing? I know for me, I get pulled away often. And I kind of think in safety, as we are safety managers, we don't know how our day is going to go because we have a planned schedule, but then something happens or someone needs, has a safety question or someone gets injured or something's always going on that our day could change instantly. So for construction employees, maybe a radio call, someone with a question, the GC wants them here, but then there's a foreman meeting with his company. So lots of different things can go on. And none of these interruptions seem like a big deal on their own. And we can handle all of them. But through the day, they build up. Every time we switch our attention, our brain has to reorientate before it fully can focus on that task again. That procedure only takes seconds. But over the course of those daily seconds, they can accumulate. By the end of the shift, no surprise, we feel mentally drained. The work has necessarily become harder, just the demands on our attention have simply increased. And I think we've all been there at least one time or another in our career. So it happens when our demands get higher, then it begins to exceed the brain capacity. So let's take a quick look on the cognitive overload. It isn't the same as anxiety, depression, or suicide risk. They're different because it reminds us of the important reality. Workers often arrive before work even started carrying a lot of pressure we can't see. We're carrying sick kids, or maybe we're caring for older parents, stress of maybe bills, all different types of things that they can carry into the job site. And a lot of times we see leaders saying, oh, we can clock in and leave our troubles at the door. But really, how is that working for us? It's really hard. I know when I've had family situations, it's really hard to leave that at the door when you're just really concerned about a loved one. But we do have some great encouraging news. We have data showing from construction data that it's moving in the right direction. From 2023 to 2024, suicide death rates have declined 1.7%. So that's great news. We are getting the word out. The organizations, the leaders, the unions, employee advocates, we're getting the word out. So we just need to keep moving because we went from 43.2 down to 41.9 deaths per 100,000 workers per year. So great job doing that. Let's just keep this going. At the same time, construction continues to have one of the highest suicide rates in the major industries. That tells us that there's still more important work to do. These statistics don't tell us what happened with any one individual. They simply remind us that people may already carry mental load through the day, and they really have a hard time speaking up. Especially in construction, we know, it's a men's, crew, and you got to be strong and, don't cry, whatever the stigma is that we need to break. They still are having a lot of those stigmas they are trying to work through. When we now add on production demands, long hours, some of construction are working 6 days a week, and they only have that one 24-hour day off, trying to cram in a bunch of family and getting, life done. So that can really take a toll on, each person. As a safety professional, our role isn't to diagnose anybody, but I want to start looking at how we can change on looking at supporting the overall environment where people feel comfortable asking questions or raising concerns early. And that's so important because it's the right thing to do. Everyone is human, and we value each and every one of them. So we looked at the human side of cognitive overload. So now let's look at why it matters from an organizational perspective. So in 2024, there was a peer review. They examined 12,000 worker compensation claims across 100 organizations. And in this research, they measured psychosocial safety climate, PSC. This is mostly organizations demonstrate and commit to protecting workers' psychological health through leadership, communication, employee involvement, and supervisor support. So organizations with weak psychosocial safety climate average on 177 lost days per worker comp claim. And then organizations that had a strong psychosocial safety climate, they had 68% lost work days. So that's a difference of 109 work days. That's a lot, especially when we're thinking about worker comp claims and how much worker comp insurance costs employees or companies each year. That same pattern appeared across each claim. The original study reported was from Australia. So I kind of did the conversion to US so you guys could kind of see in US dollars. So on an average of $47,000 per claim if they had a weak psychosocial safety climate, and then about $23,000 per claim if they had a strong psychosocial safety climate. The takeaway isn't the dollar amount. The takeaway is the organization with strong psychosocial safety climates consistently experience shorter claims. And why is that? Because people feel freer to speak up. So maybe they caught that incident earlier and it was only a medical only claim. Or a lot of times we'll see, I've spoke on this before, is when employees leave, then they start a worker comp claim after they're totally done with the company. And we see that they're trying to get back to the company. They feel like that's the right move, is just start a worker comp claim. And it could be all different reasons why an employee feels like they leave the company and start a worker comp claim. But we want to go back to see why. What's going on, not at the incident level, but before? What is that? And studies found there was an association with the strongest to the weakest climate for psychosocial safety. So that's good news. We definitely now are seeing data. We haven't seen a lot of data in the US, but we are seeing a lot of data from other countries that we can definitely look at and help us grow in the US as well. So why does work environment have that kind of influence? Let's see what happens in the brain when our demands for our attention begin to exceed the mental capacity. We've looked at the human impact of cognitive overload, and we've looked at the impact of organizational performance and the cost. Now let's spend a few times looking how the brain actually works when we're competing with other attentions throughout a job site. Let's see. We'll keep this practical and focus on 3 areas that I want to work on today, because there's many. So today we're going to work on working memory, stress response, and our attention. So understanding these 3 concepts will help us explain why the experienced and a well-trained employee still has demands on their brain that could become overwhelming. So think about an operator like the forklift, accident, incident, setting forms and installing steel. At any moment, they're following their daily work plan, whatever their foreman says. They're watching coworkers, listening to the radio, lots of different things that they could be doing. That's working memory, their job tasks throughout the day. It's the brain's temporary workplace where it holds the process and information in real time. So that's the challenge of working memory. It has limits. And every interruption, radio call, like we talked about, it takes a while to get back to that task. And it also, our brain has limited capacity for each task. So eventually something has to give. So maybe we've seen it before. Why did that step get skipped? Or why did that person not say it was unsafe to get in that trench? And then why didn't they speak up when they knew they had a loved one in the hospital or just passed away? It's not because people stopped caring or suddenly became less competent. The brain has reached its limits. And that's why understanding cognitive overload is so important. Sometimes the issue isn't the lack of knowledge. It's sometimes the lack of mental health and awareness that every person on your job site has a story and maybe going through something. And that something maybe might be the cost of your next injury. So under stress, significant stress, we know that the prefrontal cortex is part of the brain responding for planning, judgment, problem solving, and working memory. So that's what our prefrontal cortex does. And that doesn't mean we lose knowledge or experience. It means the brain is relying on faster, more automatic ways to process information. So in the first box, you'll see that the first thing we notice is communication usually drops. It's the easiest. We kind of shut down and, just get busy with our task. A worker may not even know what they're trying to say, but struggle to find the words or explain their concern early. I know when I was under stress one time, and I'm in safety, and I couldn't even get the words out. And so I'm thinking, maybe a new hire or someone under stress, if they can't get the word, if I can't get the words out, then they probably can't either. So that's a huge part of, we want to keep our brains healthy and keep ourselves in a load where we can carry it, throughout the day. And then at the second point, people tend to really rely on familiar routines. We say maybe complacency or maybe just a routine. We got home. How did we get home? Our car just got us there sometimes. And that's really good because we know that we have good procedures in place, good training, quality training. Those are so valuable. So sometimes those definitely can help us stay on track and not have an injury because we do have really some of those good values in place. And then the third point, attention can become narrow. A person may become focused on one task and maybe don't know what's going around them. That maybe someone might be, on the ladder and not, it may not be secured or someone holding it. So sometimes, we're looking at a job site and you're like, you just walked past that. Why didn't you say anything? They're so focused on one task. So, and I think we've all been there. These are temporary changes in how the brain processes information. They don't mean someone has become less committed, to working safely. So let's see how the brain is decided to respond quickly when it detects a threat. And I think you guys all know this, that flight and fight moment where the amygdala takes over. When you're under stress or have a lot of these tasks and your brain is overloaded, your brain is actually protecting you by using the amygdala and going into, that fight and flight moment. It's a protection to help our brain. So that's a good thing. That threat might not be physical, like a piece of moving equipment, but it can also be a social concern about being blamed. So different experiences that each person can face. Maybe it can also be a negative consequence. The brain does not always stop to carefully evaluate every single task to see if it reacts automatically. But when your brain is in the fight and flight moment, it is really hard to get those tasks done safely. Another response we see under high mental demands is something called cognitive tunneling, where the attention becomes concentrated on that immediate task, leaving less capacity to know what's around us, like we talked about. And it's really easy, I think, at job sites. There's so many things going on. We have so many subcontractors going on at a big job site. So there could be a lot of things going around that we don't even see. These aren't signs that someone has stopped caring. Remember that when you are going up to somebody and saying, hey, where's your hard hat? Or where's your safety glasses? Sometimes, as humans, we just need a reminder, and that caring person coming up to somebody can really just help them out, And I know as a safety professional, I've been on job sites and I have my glasses on, my steel-toed boots, but then I forgot my hard hat in the car. So someone reminded me and I said, oh, thank you. Thank you for keeping me safe too on the job sites. We need it too. Everything we talked about today leads to this idea. Cognitive overload doesn't always show up as a mistake. More often it shows up as a change in communication. So people stop asking questions, they stop sharing concerns, and maybe they'll decide to mention it later. Who knows? That's why when I do safety toolbox talks at the construction site, that's a great way to have everybody kind of speak up. And sometimes it's hard. Some people don't want to speak up on that. And, but this is where you can say, hey, what question you might find today that might help you to not talk? And maybe get questions that get answers back. Don't answer yes or no questions. So a lot of times when they're mentally occupied and they can't speak up, like when I was under some pressure, I kind of call that the mute. And some of you call it silence. As safety professionals, we spend a lot of time looking for visual hazards when we're on the job site. But sometimes the biggest risk is that conversation we never even heard about. When that conversation disappears, we've lost our strongest defense against the incident. That's why it's important to recognize these changes early. So you can kind of go around the job site, and this is kind of what I say in training sometimes too is, when you're talking about heat illness, that's a topic that's been going around is, one of them is over 90. I think you need a buddy system looking out for each one. I think that's really good because they work with each other so closely. They can kind of tell when someone's kind of quiet, or they might know that a family member just passed away yesterday. So those are really good people that are in the buddy system. They can really be a help to us too. And they can recognize early changes. And if you know your employees really well on first name basis, then you can kind of say, hey, Joe, he's not really talking. I said hi, and he's like, hi, and kind of walked away. If that's unusual for you, or, for Joe that has that communication to you, maybe then that next step of, sitting him down by himself and saying, hey, what's going on? And sometimes that's all it takes is something, just someone cares. So those early recognition really can help reduce injuries. And then more we first change, the first is change is communication. And then secondly, become quieter. The responses may be shorter. Like I said, yes, I'm fine. Nope, I don't have anything going on this weekend. Where before maybe they did tell you about what they were going to do that weekend or excited something to do. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're on job sites and you might know somebody and you're kind of like, because I know I do that too. If I'm on a job site, I'm trying to get an audit done. I'm still doing my work, but maybe something's going on at home or, at the office that I'm just really, just kind of, that's in my mind, my brain, kind of cognitive overload. So, sometimes I don't want to share or I'm not chatty as much. We have that too. What's one change you've noticed that might tell you a worker is become cognitively overloaded? So we're not there to, diagnose or assume anything like, oh, do we need to call 5150? But really just, I think a lot of people just want to know that you care, that you value them. And so we like to think of them moving from a whisper to a murmur, and then eventually to, a roar. And so this is one of the biggest lessons I've learned from investigating incidents. So they usually begin much earlier. When someone notices they don't think something's worth mentioning, it's okay. We've done it that way all the time, And maybe someone was distracted or missed something they normally would have caught. Maybe a crew was feeling pressured to get the job moving, which we do see that quite a bit in construction. So by themselves, these moments, don't seem significant. But when it begins to stack up, the level of the risk starts to grow. That's why I believe the best safety leaders, and any leader, not just safety, they just don't investigate what happened. They can recognize the early signs of, really what happened at the job site and what the job site looked like. So let's put this into practice. I'm going to give you 2 scenarios. You can read them. I'll give you just a few minutes to read each one. And as you read them, don't focus on really what went wrong, but instead ask yourself, what was an early sign that something may have changed? What's that first signal that catches up with your attention? Notice that no one waited for an injury to happen before taking action. You identified early change and looked for an opportunity to intervene while there was still time to influence the outcome. That's what effective safety looks like. It's recognizing those small little changes before they become big. This is encouraging news, is that reducing cognitive overload doesn't require a new program, a bigger budget, go ask your boss, hey, I need some more money, or another piece of technology. This is the best opportunity to know your staff, to value your employees, and to make a safe place for them to speak up. And this is how we lead, and they see it by our actions. So think about your pre-planning task that you have. We spend a lot of time, in the morning, we're identifying the physical hazards and what things, we need to look out for the day. And those are great. But let's ask one more question. Is there anything today that would make it harder for you to stay focused on that task? And it's not a yes or no, so hopefully you'll get some employees to speak up. And there's some other questions you can ask, but that's a good question you can start with if you're not sure on what you could start with the pre-planning task. Add that in and see how that goes. And it may take them a while to get used to talking, but they'll eventually, someone will talk and it'll get easier. When people know they can ask questions, and I always tell my employees, there's no dumb question, so ask away. Let them know that it's okay to ask some dumb questions, even though they're not, but that's what they say. Let's see. None of these ideas replace a good safety program or training or hazard control. We got those in place. We're doing great at them, so keep going. Good job. We just want to make sure that we are seeing what our employees are doing throughout the day, and can we make those conditions better? Making sure that they can communicate concerns. Who do they communicate concerns? Maybe that's a question we could ask some of our employees. Do you even know where to raise a concern? And if that person, say, is the foreman, is that foreman now trained in how to respond to someone that may be in a capacity of overload? One thing I'd like you to take away is, by the time an injury appears on the dashboard, we usually miss several opportunities. Over the years, one of the lessons that stayed with me rarely happened without warning. They often leave clues long before. And sometimes we may have already seen that in our incident reports. I had an employee on a job site. He was on an excavator. You guys know how big and heavy those are. And he actually ran over another employee. He needed like 5 surgeries. Luckily, he was okay. But when doing the investigation and asking those hard questions, is we found out that multiple people knew he was on methamphetamine. Also, too, when I got to talk to him, he told me that his wife just asked for a divorce, and this was the exact day of his son's death, his anniversary death. He was carrying a lot that day. And just if he felt comfortable to speak up and say, hey, I better not be on that excavator, things would have been different. So he didn't feel like anybody felt, safe to speak up at the time. When he was telling me, he knew it wouldn't change my decision on, what was going to happen to him. But we can definitely learn from this experience that we don't know everybody's story and we don't know what season that they're in. So engaging crews, knowing your employees, that helps knowing if they're, off on a day and off on a day may be okay. But when it's like a week or 2 weeks, maybe you need to step in and say, hey, what's going on? I am excited about this. I don't know about you, but can you imagine 2036, 10 years from now? And I hope people don't remember this decade because we introduced another regulation, another program, or even AI technology. But I hope they remember the time that our profession recognized that protecting people and valuing people is what our kind of career has gone to. Because I think we have everything in place really well. We do a great job as it, with identifying hazards and control. But we know how the brain has limits, how our attention can get overloaded, communication can drop. So now that we all know this, now that we can take action, reduce unnecessary distractions, we can create an environment where people feel comfortable asking those questions, create a safer workplace, and value each and every person that is on your site. That gets me excited about the next generation of leadership looks like. And I believe really we are already started on that next generation. I believe the future of safety leadership won't define the next regulation or the next piece of technology. We will really understand people on how they work. With cognitive overload and psychosocial hazards, it will become more common part of our safety conversation. And like we saw, that 1.7 drop in suicide rates in a short period of time now that we are talking about it. We now have a whole safety week in September for prevention for it. We can keep going. We can keep making sure that number of suicides in construction drops. I just know we're going to do it. I'm just so excited to see where the next 10 years are and where those numbers are. So over the last hour, we've explored how cognitive overload and how it affects the brain and communication. So I hope when you leave here today, you look at your people a little bit different. Not because they're less capable, but because they add value to your team. And they might be carrying something more than you realize. So I want to leave you with one more question. What's one thing you'd like to do in this week to come to make it easier for someone to speak up? Or have you already started something in your company that has already really taken place that's worked for you? So yeah, over the next decade, we definitely are going to improve training. We got AI. We have different things that are going to help us improve those things. Let's keep going. Let's keep doing what works because we know that what works. But let's take also aside, like Naomi said, the body too, the brain. We still need to look at that and add that into. And I know some companies are now training on first aid mental health. There's lots of different resources out there that we can use and start encouraging, our employees to speak up and also our companies to look beyond the task. So Before we finish, I want to acknowledge a couple last things that we've been talking about. Something you've heard today makes you think about yourself or someone you work with. We always want to make time for this where we can have people know where to call, whether it's 988 suicide and crisis online, maybe an EAP program that you can call. I've heard in other webinars and where I speak at safety conferences is, well, I get that one person that's kind of calling bluff because he doesn't want to work. And what I say to that is, maybe it's that one person, but you don't know who that one person is. And maybe it's that one person you could save their life. So let's worry less about, is he really trying to get out of work, or really can we just help this person in this time? And, so we want to make sure that you guys have all the equipment you need at your job sites, just in case somebody needs to call, have these posted throughout your job site, and let people know when you're training that there is a place they can call and speak up, because we really value them. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I hope you leave with one simple idea or something you can share with another safety manager or your work. But we want to create a workplace where it's easier to speak up, raise concerns, and stay focused on the work that matters most. And that is each and every person. You guys matter, you're valued, and we want to make sure that everybody feels like there's someone that cares about them.